Today, we're looking at something causing, well, quite a bit of alarm across the UK. It's about potential changes, maybe quite sudden ones, to who qualifies for the free bus pass. So our mission today is pretty focused. We've gathered the sources raising the flags, and we really need to get to the bottom of it. How might this policy change work? And crucially, which birth years could actually be at risk of losing this benefit?
And it's vital we frame this right from the start. The sources we've looked at, they don't just call it a perk, they call it a lifeline.
A lifeline. That's strong language.
It is. Because this isn't just about saving a couple of quid here and there. It's genuinely about independence for thousands of pensioners, people on lower incomes, those with disabilities. It's how they stay connected, get to appointments, see family. Taking that away, it has really profound ripple effects.
Okay, let's unpack that then. Before we dive into the sort of policy mechanics, let's ground this in today's economic climate. Why is this pass so essential right now?
Well, it's absolutely tied into the cost of living crisis, isn't it? Our sources basically describe the pass as critical for, daily survival.
Daily survival.
Yeah. I mean, when households are already struggling, really struggling, with food bills, energy bills shooting up, every single penny counts. There's just no wiggle room for many.
And if you try and put a number on losing that pass,
Yeah.
I mean, the cost adds up incredibly quickly for people who are already vulnerable.
Oh, absolutely. It really does. If you just look at typical fares, maybe outside the big cities, a single bus journey could easily be £2.50, maybe £3
All right.
Now think about someone needing maybe 4 or 5 trips a week. That could be a doctor's visit, popping to the shops, maybe seeing a grandchild. You're suddenly looking at an extra £40, £50, maybe even £60 every single month.
Wow.
And what's really fascinating or maybe sobering is putting that number in context. The basic state pension, well, it doesn't leave a lot of disposable cash for many people.
No.
So finding an extra, say, £50 a month out of thin air, that's just not easy. That money has to come from somewhere else. And the sources are really clear. This forces that awful choice we hear about, heating versus eating.
Gosh, so it directly hits whether they can afford groceries or put the heating on when it's cold.
Exactly. It's that stark for some.
And then there's the sort of the human side of it, too. People who worked their whole lives, paid taxes, contributed, often with this kind of implicit promise that certain things would be there for them later on. Losing the pass, the sources say it feels like a broken promise.
Mm-hmm. A real sense of betrayal, almost. It adds an emotional hit on top of the financial one.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit to the mechanism. How are they actually proposing to make these changes? Because that's where it gets, well, quite tricky. The warnings seem to focus on one thing, the year you were born.
That's right. That seems to be the core issue. Whether they're talking about gradually lifting the qualifying age or maybe tightening the rules somehow, it all seems to hinge on using specific birth years as the cutoff point.
Which immediately rings alarm bells, doesn't it? Because we've seen this kind of mechanism before, and it caused a lot of pain.
We have, and this is where it gets, as you say, really interesting, maybe even worrying. This isn't the first time a UK government has used birth year to sort of, move the goalposts on benefits. We saw it very clearly with the state pension changes.
Ah, yes, the state pension age. That's the parallel everyone's drawing.
Precisely. The whole approach feels eerily similar. The government changed the state pension age, and the way they did it using birth year cohorts, it particularly caught women born in the 1950s completely off guard.
I remember that. Huge outcry.
Huge, because many found out, sometimes with very little notice, relatively speaking, that their retirement age had suddenly shifted, sometimes by several years. And that created a massive financial shock for a whole group of people who often couldn't just, jump back into work or magic up more savings.
So when we talk about using birth year as this sort of arbitrary cutoff, it creates this deeply unfair situation. You could literally be 1 year younger than your friend, your neighbor.
Exactly.
And purely because of that date on your birth certificate, they keep the bus pass and you lose it.
And that arbitrary line feeling is what causes so much resentment, so much instability. Now, you asked which birth years are actually at risk.
Yes, that's the key question everyone wants answered.
Right. And we need to be really clear here. Our sources haven't pinpointed a specific, definite date that's been officially decided, and that's likely because these are still proposals, discussions, maybe even, trial balloons being floated.
But the warnings are there for a reason. Someone's worried.
Oh, absolutely. The alarm seems to be focused on those age groups who are currently approaching or have maybe just recently passed the existing eligibility age for the pass.
Okay.
So this strongly suggests that any changes coming soon would likely target people born roughly between, say, 1955 and 1960. That mirrors the kind of cohort affected by the state pension delays. Or perhaps those who are just a few years away from reaching the current state pension age now. It's the uncertainty itself that's causing so much anxiety.
Understood. Okay, let's look at the official side. There's always a reason given for these kinds of potential cuts, isn't there? Governments are under pressure, budgets are tight.
That's the line, yes. Managing public spending. Our sources mention that public transport budgets are seen as being, quote, stretched to breaking point. So adjustments are framed as being about, well, sustainability in the long run.
Sustainability.
Okay.
But connect this to the bigger picture for us. Campaigners argue this is flawed thinking, right? That it's short-term saving for long-term pain.
That's exactly the argument. It sounds like a paradox, saving money by cutting a free benefit. But the point campaigners make is that the costs don't just disappear, they just shift somewhere else, often becoming much bigger.
How does that work? Where do the costs reappear?
Well, take the NHS, for example, the NHS burden. If an older person can't afford the bus fare to get to, say, a routine doctor's appointment or a checkup for a chronic condition like diabetes, what happens?
They probably put it off or list it altogether.
Exactly. They postpone it or they just don't go. And then minor issues can become major ones. Untreated conditions get worse. And eventually, that person might end up needing much more expensive emergency care, maybe even a hospital admission.
So the Department for Transport saves, what, 50 quid on bus fares over a few months?
Right.
But the NHS picks up a bill for maybe thousands of pounds down the line for something that could have been prevented or managed earlier in A&E.
Precisely. It's a classic case of shifting costs, not saving them. And it doesn't stop there. You also have the social costs.
Social costs, like loneliness.
Yes, exactly. If someone loses their affordable way to get around, they often become more isolated. They might stop going to community groups, volunteer things, or even just visiting friends and family. That isolation, it's directly linked to poorer mental health and even physical decline. So it really begs the question, if the actual cost of the entire free bus pass scheme is, as some sources suggest, relatively tiny compared to other massive government spending areas.
Like defense or big infrastructure projects.
Yeah. Can cutting it really be justified if it just pushes those costs, very real financial and social costs, onto families, onto the NHS, onto local councils already struggling with social care budgets? It feels less like saving money overall and more about deciding who has to pay the price for sustainability.
Let's focus on that human impact for a moment.
Yeah.
You mentioned dignity, freedom. That pass allows people to maintain their autonomy, doesn't it? What's the effect when that's taken away?
It can be devastating. That pass often represents mobility, yes, but also independence and dignity. Losing it can genuinely accelerate the kind of decline people fear as they get older. Less activity, less social interaction.
Less connection to their community.
Absolutely. Less participation in local life, whether that's volunteering, going to clubs, just having a coffee with friends. It directly feeds into loneliness, and we know loneliness has measurable negative impacts on both mental and physical health. For many, that pass isn't just transport. It's literally their connection to the world outside their front door.
And we absolutely have to talk about the geography here, because this won't hit everyone equally across the UK, will it?
Oh, not at all. The impact is hugely uneven. If you live in a big city, London, Manchester, Birmingham, you might have other options. You know, the tube, trams, maybe more frequent or competitive bus routes.
Right. There are alternatives, even if they cost money.
Exactly. But if you're in a rural area, it's a completely different story, often a far more catastrophic one.
How so?
Well, in many villages and smaller towns, buses might already be infrequent, maybe only running a couple of times a day. The fares can be higher too. And crucially, there often just aren't any other public transport options. No train station nearby, no trams.
So for people in those rural communities, losing the bus pass could literally mean
Wow.
what? Being completely cut off.
That's what the sources suggest. They could be cut off almost entirely from the outside world. It's their only realistic way to get to shops, banks, doctors, pharmacies, see family, anything beyond walking distance. It's a physical lifeline.
And layering on top of all this is the political dimension, the uncertainty. That must add so much stress.
Immense stress. The sources really highlight this. All the mays and ifs around the timing, the lack of clear information. It leaves vulnerable people in this horrible limbo. People need some certainty to plan their finances, especially when budgets are already tight.
And these decisions aren't made in a vacuum, are they? They're political.
Very much so. These kinds of cuts, these policy tweaks, they often become, well, bargaining chips during budget negotiations or leading up to elections. It introduces this profound instability into the lives of people who need stability the most.
So if you're listening to this and you or someone you know falls into that potential risk group, maybe born between 1955 and 1960,
Yeah.
what do the sources suggest people should be doing right now?
Well, the advice from the advocacy groups seems pretty consistent. Don't wait, prepare now, stay informed, but try to focus on official announcements when they come rather than just speculation. They strongly advise writing to your local MP, making your voice heard now before any final decisions are made. And importantly, they talk about collective action. Campaigners often say that governments do take notice when pensioners unite. So getting involved in advocacy efforts, even preemptively, is seen as crucial.
Right. So putting all these pieces together, what's the big picture takeaway here? This debate about the bus pass, it's clearly about more than just transport policy, isn't it?
Oh, much more. It really feels like a proxy battle, a stand-in for a much wider, deeper societal discussion about, well, the promises we make to older citizens, will the support and dignity they expected, perhaps felt they earned, actually be there? Or can essential support just be chipped away when budgets feel tight?
It's a test of trust, really.
Exactly, a fundamental test of trust.
Yeah.
And it has implications way beyond the current generation of pensioners, because policies like this, they set precedents. Well, how the government handles this issue today, potentially rolling back eligibility for something seen as essential, using birth year as the tool it sends a powerful signal for the future. If this kind of approach is normalized now for the bus pass, based purely on budget pressures, well, what does that say about the security of other benefits or services that younger generations currently rely on or expect to rely on in the future?
Like state pensions down the line or healthcare access.
Precisely. Or maybe things like housing support, long-term care funding. If a specific birth cohort can lose out now, who's to say other cohorts won't face similar cuts to different services later on?
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. If this principle, using an arbitrary birth year to cut or change access to an essential public service like the bus pass, becomes accepted practice, what other long-promised public support systems, maybe ones that seem secure today for younger people, could be next on the chopping block when future governments decide they need to achieve sustainability?